Here we've got Karl Flocke. He's a Woodland ecologist for the Texas A&M Forest Service. In his current position, he works on issues involving forest health and stewardship, conservation education, and emergency response in Central and West Texas.
All right. Well, thank y'all. At the risk of one-upping Dr. Matheny, I slept 4 hours last night because of twins, which I think is one up. But I hope I do as good as she did. So we've got some landowners in here. We've got some land managers in here. But a lot of us are in the advise and consent role. We are the folks that are going to be going out meeting with the stewards who are not in this room. So how do we go about stewarding those stewards? I'm going to walk you through an outline that I use with the Texas A&M Forest Service, and my colleagues do as well, whenever we go out on a property, meet with the landowner, and ultimately oftentimes write them a forest stewardship plan. Yes, forest stewardship plan in Central Texas, it's a thing. The way we look at this is we'll look at what we have, we'll look at what the landowner wants, we think about what is realistic, and then we come up with some solutions to help them reach their goals. And at the end, we're going to go through kind of 10 kind of low impact recommendations that you could be making. So what do we have? Oftentimes that can start before we actually get out on the site itself, the desktop work as we call it, or sitting on our butt. We talked a lot about some of the things that you're looking at, and then a few of the systems were touched on really heavily this morning, ESD and EMS. Those are certainly some good resources that you can use to think about what is maybe possible on the site or what is currently on the site. But of course, it's no substitution for actually getting out there, boots on the ground, and seeing what the issues are. Are there erosion issues? What is that management history? When was it last cleared? When was it last burned? What is the disturbance going on? What is our observed diversity? Do we think that there is potential diversity for that site that is not currently represented, and can it be represented? And lots of times one of the things we're going to be thinking about is there natural regeneration of desirable species? Or are we headed to a really non-sustainable, more monoculture type environment? And if so, what can be done about that? But we have to know what the landowner wants, right? What are their objectives? And so I got on Zillow, the real estate site, pulled up the hill country, looked at some of the largest properties in the hill country right now for sale, looked for some commonalities. And a couple of things I came up with: people like live oaks. People like live oaks and Adirondacks. People like crummy looking live oaks and Adirondacks. People like crummy looking live oaks and crummy looking Adirondacks. And here they went to great pains to show you they already took care of all that pesky cedar for you. This property is just BYOA. It's good to go. But realistically, what do they actually want? In my work talking to landowners, these are some of the main things that I come up with. A lot of times objectives, we've all been told this about the absentee landowner. And nowadays, especially in the eastern hill country, I would say that's not the case at all. Now we've got the retiree landowner, and their main objectives are oftentimes aesthetics. They want a nice, pretty, peaceful place to live that's not too far outside the city. Grazing, of course, is still an objective, but for a lot, again, in the eastern hill country, that's going away more and more as well. We still see a lot of people interested in wildlife, both game and non-game. And more often, I am told by landowners that one of their key objectives are pollinators. Go figure, pollinators, okay. Both our native ones as well as for that next thing, 1D1 valuation. A lot of people want bees on their land right now for that ag valuation. 1D1 valuation, Shane talked about it a lot this morning. That was really good. That is a driving force for land management in Central Texas, in Ashe, Juniper woodlands. I am guilty. That habitat manipulation, that is some low-hanging fruit. And to me, a chainsaw, a bonfire, and maybe a six-pack is a pretty good Saturday in November. Not in that order, though, of course. You do it in that order. A few forest products. Every now and then I'll go on a property and I'm told I want cedar posts, I want firewood, maybe some boutique lumber, but there aren't a whole lot of markets out there for them, we realize. And so there's not a lot of ways to recoup the costs of some of these management activities. And unfortunately, I hear it time and time again, people manage their land, specifically they cut down their cedar because it's what they're supposed to do. I get on the property and they apologize that they haven't cut their cedar down yet, or they are so proud that they cut down their cedar. And we need to get rid of that myth and not do it because we're supposed to, but do what is logical, right? Oftentimes when I really can't get at the heart of what the person wants, I'll ask them, why this property? We certainly have some multi-generational landowners out there. There are fewer and fewer of them though. And in the eastern hill country where I primarily work, a lot of folks have owned the property for maybe 5 years. And so I like to know, why did you buy this property? Not the one down the road, not the one in the other county, this property. And that oftentimes gets at the heart of what their real interests are and what they really want. Once we find out what they want, we've got to figure out what's realistic. No amount of thoughts and prayers is going to make this magnolia that was planted 2 weeks ago on a caliche hillside facing southwest in Hays County survive this summer. It's not going to happen. They can water it every single day. It will be dead in a few months. So what's possible? What is advisable? Right? We can do some things that are possible. We can go out and clear cut. Is it advisable? So that's where the best available science comes in. That's where everything you've learned in this room today comes into play. You've got to take that and you've got to communicate it back to the landowner. You've got to dispel the myths that they've been told for a long time, right? And ultimately, we're not doctors, but we want to follow a Hippocratic oath. We want to first do no harm. And when we think about that, some of the areas we can be thinking of are soil stability, water quality. I put that real big because it's oftentimes very easy to see what we're doing for water quality. Quantity I put small because it's difficult to really quantify what we're doing for water quantity sometimes, but that's important. Biodiversity, super important. Minimize hazards. Here we're probably thinking about wildfire as a primary hazard with our cedar management strategies. And the bottom line here is the bottom line. Very often landowners have limited resources to do these activities, and so that's going to be a very driving factor in what their decisions are and what they're doing. So what are some strategies where we can marry the ideas of what they want and what we've talked about and get some good outcomes for the landowner and for the environment as a whole? The first one I would recommend is sweating the small stuff. Working here in an early successional state, upland sites typically, maybe some bottomlands or floodplains if we've got a good intact, maybe deciduous canopy that have small cedars coming up in it. Otherwise, we're looking for places that have good, intact, herbaceous cover, and just making sure that we're really more managing in this stage. The Lopperpalooza, as it was called earlier, love it. Great way, easy way, and high impact way to manage the property. Working incrementally. So this is oftentimes a better strategy, maybe in a mid-successional state. Again, probably on some of our upland sites, maybe on a very select few slopes, minor slopes, if there's pretty good grass or herbaceous cover. But we want areas probably that have other established trees, some grass, some forb, and we're just kind of managing back the amount of junipers in these areas. Good reason for this. A lot of times people are going to do this for what we call in forestry hardwood release, right? We want to promote the oaks. But if you take these junipers, these cedars that have been growing under the oak tree for 20, 25 years, you take them out overnight, it's going to drastically change the growing conditions of that remaining oak tree. It's going to make it so much hotter, it's going to make it so much drier, it's going to be stressful for the oak tree. It is going to be the opposite of what you want to do. Also, if you're taking all that juniper out all of a sudden, you've got a nice layer of juniper duff leaf litter underneath. It's going to take time for that dormant seed bank to come up through it. So think about it incrementally, working maybe a third this year, a third next year, maybe a quarter the year after, leaving the remainder. That is a good strategy where we can slowly adapt this landscape towards that landowner's vision without causing adverse harm. Our goal, our Hippocratic oath. Limbing up trees. Typically, we're looking in mid, or I would say more late successional state. My target for this would really be a closed canopy woodland. You see it sometimes out in more open grasslands where people are limbing up. That is a strategy. It might have some benefits, but really I'm thinking closed canopy woodland here, where we're keeping that nice canopy for, say, our golden cheek warblers. It might improve view shed for the landowner. It might improve recreational access. It might provide a little bit more sunlight, a little bit more availability for that understory to start growing up. Get some desirable, maybe rare plants in there. One of the reasons, though, I think Justice hit on it yesterday, we see it a lot, and we're promoting it a lot, is this shaded fuel break concept. And the idea here isn't to go out and do it at a landscape scale. We're not doing 20, 30, 50 acres. We're looking at it linearly, typically along roadways. Maintaining that closed canopy, again, is key. Is key to make sure that we have got the cooler environment underneath, the wetter environment underneath, higher humidity. That is what we're using as the fire control to keep that fire down on the ground where it is easy to knock down with water, or as I've seen many times, goes out on its own. Guiding disturbance. So take advantage of those micro disturbances that are happening on the landscape. Whether it's an ice storm, that never happens, a drought, that also never happens. There are these disturbances happening out there, and we can utilize those and guide those. And that's an important in our altered ecosystem. Take this site where we've got a Spanish or Texas red oak, died probably because of drought, blew over. We've now got this nice opening in a good juniper oak woodland. Under historic conditions, that would have resprouted. And that oak resprout would have ascended into the canopy and replaced its parent tree. These are not historical conditions. You can see in the lower picture there, that's the oak resprout. It gets browsed down every single year to the point it's actually dead in this picture. So my management strategy here would be to catch that early on, cut those small junipers, because we've got a lot of junipers in this woodland. We need some more oaks for that habitat component. Protect that oak tree and allow that oak sprout to ascend into the canopy and assume that role. Work strategically. I said it before, we're probably not going out hitting 100 acres at once. We want to hit the areas that are important. So thinking about fire protection, not treating the entire BCP, but treating the places up against neighborhoods, along roads, along trails. That's where we're going to fight fires. That's where fires are going to start. That's where we're going to have our success. Working in flat terrain, really focusing in on that flat terrain, the deeper soils, the places where we have high potential for diversity, high potential for good vegetation to grow, not the juniper's bad vegetation, but that potential for other vegetation to grow and have this nice, healthy mosaic system. We talked about this a lot, use what you got. There are a lot of great uses out there, whether it's wildlife cover, browse protection, erosion control. Utilizing that juniper slash is a great management strategy, holistic on the land. Leave some cedar. This is the cedar conference. Hopefully everyone's got an idea why that's good. Hopefully everyone's thinking about biodiversity and why having, one more species would be good. I want you to think of this right now from a forest health perspective. When we talk about urban forestry, we have a rule of thumb where we'd like to see no more than 30% of the trees within a city representing a single family, 20% from a genus, and 10% of a single species. Now that's hard to do in a wild setting, especially when we've got so much of one single species and a lot of our remaining diversity is a single genus, Quercus. But the idea here is if all you've got is ash tree and the emerald ash borer comes in, you're kind of in trouble. And if all we have is live oaks and Adirondacks, and you get oak wilt, again, you're in trouble. So keeping that diversity of other species on the landscape is something, I see it time and time again. I cut all my cedars. They're so proud. You've got oak wilt. You've got no trees now. That was not your objective, was it? And so leave some cedar from a forest health perspective. I think this one's probably pretty straightforward. Again, I hear it time and time again. People want to invest their time, they want to invest their money and energy into cutting cedar, and then we walk on the landscape and they've left the China berries, they've left the ailanthus in this case, they left the cedar too. But prioritize the real invasives. That's where we want to focus efforts. If we do nothing else in our woodland environment, prioritize those real invasives. Again, self-explanatory. don't bulldoze. Ash juniper do not have a dormant basal bud. If you cut them down low enough, they're not going to resprout. We don't need a bulldoze. There are mechanical methods that could be used that could be appropriate, but when we get into the talk of pushing and ripping up the land and soil, it's not a good management strategy for ash juniper. And finally, my favorite one, embrace ambiguity and help the landowner embrace ambiguity too. Ecology is not black and white. And a lot of our landowners out there, I think it might have something to do with the salary, they're engineers, and they think black and white. There is a correct answer, and that is not the case with ecology. That is not the case with land management. A forester's favorite saying, I'm sure it's your favorite saying too, is sometimes. Sometimes, yes. So we need to help people understand that mosaics exist across the landscape. Mosaics can exist on a single property, and we can't oversimplify the entirely complex systems. We don't want to fall into the rut of over-defining either. This is a savanna, this is a forest. Sometimes, right? We can have appropriate in both situations. And so that is my favorite management strategy of all. And then wrapping up, questions. I think we've got time actually. That QR code there takes you to Texas A&M Forest Service specific Central Texas issues and social medias. So that's good. But questions?
Okay, good. Yeah, so it looks like we have time for some questions. Anybody?
Yeah.
Than years previous, and so I'm wondering what you've seen, what your thoughts are on that, and how the stress to the oak trees from having an entire species removed from that ecosystem, how you think that affects those trees.
So a lot of people ask about the connection between oak wilt and cedars. And there are a lot of hypotheses and theories out there. A few things you have to keep in mind about oak wilt is it is a primary pathogen. It will kill a healthy oak tree. And so why you're seeing oak wilt in these areas where cedars have been removed, a major reason will be up here in the right picture where they drove that skid steer through the forest and just tore up the oak trees, created wounds on these oak trees. Those are now infection points. So that's part of it. The other thing goes back to that, removing all the cedars. Now you see the oak wilt. That's another part of it. It could be there, you just weren't seeing it. As far as relationship, I hear mycorrhizae mentioned a lot, and it was brought up yesterday that mycorrhizae can kill a lot of pathogens in soil. Something that you need to keep in mind is that oak wilt is not in the soil. Oak wilt is moving through the root system of the tree itself, so any kind of relationship would have to come through an endomycorrhizae, and there's no known relationship at this point in time of that nature. As far as stress, oak wilt is also extremely heat sensitive, so there could be some argument theoretically that that hotter, drier environment without the cedars would actually be better at suppressing oak wilt. That would be completely theoretical, though. My observations, I've spent far too many hours poking through really pokey, scratchy cedar trying to get around the edge of oak wilt. So I see it together all the time.
Other questions?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there's just 3 sentences about an ash juniper, and one of them is that it's considered an invasive weed throughout the country.
Yeah, that's, I think, in the Trees of Texas, that website there. I'm familiar with that. And it goes back to this oversimplify and overdefine. That's one area where it might be good to overdefine because they are using, we are using, I'll take credit, we are using a definition on that site that's very common in range management. Weed, for example, where we are saying that a native plant that is expanding in abundance or range, we're calling that invasive. And that's a pretty common definition used, especially in range science. It's not the definition I like to use. I like to specifically apply invasive species to something that is non-native to probably that continent, definitely has a human link. That's what I like to use. And so that's an area where, yeah, definition is important. Is the definition they're using there wrong? I don't like it, but it is an accepted one by many people.
Anything else? We good? All right, great. Good talk.